the fallacy about practice. People think that just because you have repetition, just because you do something over and over again, without actually reflecting and changing what it is that you're doing wrong, you're never going to get any better. Why are there people who can make 300, 400 phone calls a day, make no sales, and come in the next day with the same intensity, same ferocity, same positivity to make those 400 dials? Why can some people do that and some don't? Well, because the people with the vision who understand what the suffering is for, they can justify that suffering because they understand what the end goal is. Because somebody who's good at everything will not ever get paid as well as somebody who's fantastic at one thing. Ladies and gentlemen, we're back. So I know that people were clamoring for a couple of guests that we were planning on having today. This is the Jersey Boys. We're going to have Vinny, T-Sean, Nikki on the pod, but up in New York, I guess they got a little bit of snow. It's a whole big deal. People can't handle it. Cancel all the flights, so they couldn't make it in for today. But that's fine. We'll get them in on another episode. So with that being the case, it's just going to be another opportunity for me to express some of the things that I've been thinking about the previous week or two since the last episode, and try to give you some perspective in terms of what I think about on a weekly basis to try to get to the next level in my business and my career, and how you can implement that for yourself, and how I would encourage you to think about the world in order to get you to the next level. As life goes by, it's very easy to get caught up in the monotony of it all, not really think too much, just show up, do what you do on autopilot, and without you even realizing it, the time just passes and passes and passes by without you actually making any kind of adjustment or game planning at all in terms of how you're going to get to the next step in your life. How are you going to get to that next level? How are you going to get to that next income, that next tax bracket? How are you going to get to the next level? If you don't sit down and actively think about it and reflect on what you're doing on the week, month, year prior, you're never going to make any kind of adjustments. Just because you're going through the motions doesn't mean you're actually doing anything different or improving. It's actually the fallacy about practice. People think that just because you have repetition, just because you do something over and over again, without actually reflecting and changing what it is that you're doing wrong, you're never going to get any better. As I'm going through the week, Christmas goes by, we have the new year coming up, I'm reflecting on the year prior and saying, okay, what did I do well? Let me continue to do those things. What did I do poorly? Let me go ahead and make adjustments so I don't make those same mistakes going into the next year. And so one of the things I was reflecting on was how easy it is to forget about the macro of what it is you're trying to accomplish and forget about the context in which you're trying to accomplish in your life. So what do I mean by that? When we only look at the micro, what you're doing on a daily basis, what your job is, how you make money, your gym routine, like the very minute details, the micro, it's important to keep those things in mind. It's important to do those things at a high level because that's how you're going to make money in the meantime. That's how you're going to accomplish your daily tasks, which are important to compound over time. Though if you never step back and look at the macro and the context of the world in which you're living in, you're going to miss so much of the game that's being played. You might think that you're playing the game the right way, when in reality, the context in which you see the world, the lens in which you look at the world through is incorrect. It's foggy. It's blurry. If you don't see it through the right lens, you're not going to really accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. Or even worse, you're not even going to know what you're trying to accomplish. So when I say macro, what are some of the things I was thinking about on the macro? It's one thing to try to make money. It's one thing to try to get rich or pay the bills or pay rent. But on a macro, what are you actually trying to accomplish with your business or the money that you make? What's the goal? And so the most macro you could start with is your religion. What religion are you? What do you care about? What are your morals? What are your beliefs? Do you know where those beliefs come from? And so something that I've done in the past, and I'm sure so many of you doing right now as you watch this, is you don't take a step back to think about where do your beliefs actually come from? and why they matter or why they matter to you, or if you, whether or not you should believe them. You never actually dissected where they came from. You just kind of accepted these beliefs. They came from somewhere, and now that you believe them, that's just what it is. What I've been doing a lot in the last year or so is really dissecting where a lot of my beliefs and what my ideologies are and why I have them. And so, for example, if you're one of the three major religions, we'll call it the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, Muslim, do you just believe what you believe to believe it, or do you actually know where those religions come from? Do you know the history behind them? Have you actually read the books? Do you know what the morals, the beliefs, the statutes are? Do you actually live by them, or do you try your best to live by them? It's very dangerous just to go through your life without ever thinking about those macro issues, right? We kind of just accept our beliefs as they are, and then we just go through life. And the issue I found with that is, in order for you to be making the right decisions and right actions on the micro, you got to make sure you're taking a look at the macro. And are you actually operating under the right context? And so I'll give you an example of this. You might be, let's say, a marathon runner, okay? And before you go out to run the marathon, the main things you're going to do the same no matter what. But the environment in which you're going to run the marathon in will dictate some of your actions before you go to make that run, right? If you're going to run in Russia during the winter, you're going to pick a different outfit. You're going to put on different clothes. You're going to do different things to prepare for that race than as if you were in the, Sahara desert, right? You're going to move a little bit differently. The marathon is still the marathon, but on the micro level, you're going to make different decisions to be able to get you the desired result. And so what I mean by this, the metaphor is so when you live your daily life and you're making decisions on a micro level, what you're going to do to make money, what type of business are you going to start, what's your game plan to get out of the current situation that you're in right now, you're going to make different decisions based on the context on the macro, the environment that you're operating in. And so as I'm thinking about these things, and I'm doing more research, learning about my faith, learning about my religion, where these things come from, what are the different ideas, what are the pros, what are the cons, what are the fors and the againsts? Don't always look at everything as only trying to reinforce your own beliefs. No, take a look at what are the antagonist positions. Who are the people that are opposing your current belief system, and what are their arguments? What do they believe? Look into all of those different things, because the better you can understand how people think on a macro level, the better decision making you're going to make on a micro. So if you don't understand where these religions come from, why people think the way that they think, you're not going to be able to make moves on the chessboard that make sense in terms of the greater concept of what's happening in the world. So I believe it's important. You got to take a look at these things from the macro. What's the actual game that's being played? Right? What game are we actually playing? If you're studying and you're preparing for a game of Monopoly, but in reality it's a chessboard that you're playing on, you're not going to do so well. Your strategies might be conducive for Monopoly. You could be the absolute best Monopoly player in the world, but if the game on a macro is being played on a chessboard, you're going to do poorly. It's important to take a look at these things. Okay, what's actually the goal here? Now, when you can understand the world the best that you can on a micro level and what people are trying to accomplish and how they're thinking, now you can take your situation and say, okay, how am I going to position myself in a place where 5 to 10 years from now, I'm going to be in an advantageous position, and I'm going to be in a place where I can actually do the things that I want to do, as opposed to just hoping that I get there. For example, like with making money, it's very difficult. I say this to people all the time. It's very difficult to suffer and do things that are difficult without actually having a vision as to where you're going to get to. Right? Without a vision, the people will perish. There's a reason that resonates with a lot of people. So in a sales context, why are there people who can make 300, 400 phone calls a day, make no sales, and come in the next day with the same intensity, same ferocity, same positivity to make those 400 dials? Why can some people do that and some don't? Well, because the people with the vision who understand what the suffering is for, they can justify that suffering because they understand what the end goal is. Somebody who's just showing up to make dials, thinking that nothing is going to come of it or not understanding why they're going through this pain, they're much less likely to continue to endure that pain if it doesn't make sense to them. So you got to make sure that on a macro level, you have the context in which you're trying to accomplish your goals so you can start to develop a real vision. When you have a real vision in terms of what you're trying to accomplish and you can see, I mean, not just an idea, a thought, no, but like really visualize it in your mind. You can feel it. You can feel the Ferrari. You can feel the leather. You can feel the speed. You can feel the hair, the wind in your hair. You can see the house. You can see the family. You can see the kids. It's so real. You could basically reach out and touch it. When you have the vision on that level, what you do on a daily basis, the suffering that you endure will mean nothing. It'll be all worthwhile because you understand where you're going. So think about these things. Now, when you start to dissect your faith, your religion, the country that you live in, how people are actually making money in your economy, you start to think about these things and you start to understand how people and the money starts to flow. Now you can position yourself in a way where you can go ahead and benefit from that system or from that game. So don't be naive, right? So let's say your goal is to genuinely become worth $100 million. Let's just say that's your goal. If your goal is to make $100 million, you got to understand how somebody in your system would accumulate that kind of money. You're not going to hit that target. You're not going to get to that goal by just, let's say, working a normal job. The person who's working a normal job for their entire life is not going to save up to $100 million. So if that's your real goal, you understand you have to be able to get yourself into a different position to accumulate that kind of wealth. Well, how do people do that? Have you ever thought about that? Well, it's not going to be from saving money, right? Inflation, the appreciation of assets, all of that's going to outpace your ability to save. So you couldn't save enough money up in the first place. And the money that you save is going to continue to lose value as you save it over the years. So that's not the goal, right? If your end goal is becoming rich and winning the game, a job at the beginning is just your ability to tread water. You're treading water, you're keeping yourself afloat just long enough so you can figure out how to get yourself out of the pool. Getting out of the pool is the end goal. Treading water is just what you need to do right now to survive until you figure out how to get out of the pool. You work 40 hours a week, you work your job, you make your money. Now, how do you take the other 40 hours a week? So you're working a total of 80. How do you take that other 40 and either make enough money to get yourself out of the current position or figure out a way to make more money outside of those working hours? You got to look at the game on a macro. What would somebody do? Where's the money flowing? Well, most of the money is flowing from the real world into the digital world. So most money is going online. Most people are making money online. Most people are making money virtually. Insurance industry, perfect example. Before COVID, everybody used to drive door to door, knocking on people's houses to try to sell them insurance. Think about how much time it took to drive out into the field, knock on people's doors, get somebody to let you into the house, spend 30 minutes in an hour, likely an hour, to sell this person a policy, get into the car, drive to the next location, do the same thing again. Think about how much time that took. After COVID, when people were forced to go virtual, the industry completely explodes. Why? Because the money was able to flow online with less friction, with less time wasted. So instead of driving door to door, people are able to just, boom, call you over the phone, jump onto a quick Zoom call, and do that entire process from the comfort of their own home. So the efficiency goes up. The industry didn't change from a monetary aspect. People didn't just start making more commissions. People didn't just start, figuring out a way to close at a higher percentage. No, close ratio stayed the same. You sell the same amount of people now that you would 10 years ago in terms of close ratio. You sell the same amount of premium in terms of what you would 10 years ago. The difference is the speed and efficiency in which you can make the money. It was from going virtual. So money industry is all flowing virtual. Think about how many people actually have a physical business and really make significant amounts of money. It's very rare. It's very difficult. Okay. Most things are flowing online. So if you're thinking, okay, I know business is online. I know money is online. I know I need to be virtual at some aspect, in some sense. That's my best bet. without having a lot of money to invest up front into a physical business. So then you think, okay, let me get into virtual sales. It's going to be your best option, okay? Get into a virtual environment, in an environment where you can sell. So now you take away the hourly wage and you substitute that for a commission. So now your time is no longer tied to the money, it's tied to the result. You focus on getting a better result, you make more money in the same amount of time, okay? So now you can start to dig yourself out of the hole. You can start to get yourself out of this situation. This is what I recommend people to do. Get into virtual sales. Learn how to sell something virtually. Okay, cool. So now you're making money. Now that you're starting to make money, what can you do with that money to put yourself in a position where you no longer have to do the work yourself, labor yourself that way? Well, now you got to think about, well, how do people get wealthy? Typically, it's assets. That's how they stay wealthy and get wealthy. What are assets? Could be crypto, could be homes, could be domains, website domains, could be anything that you have ownership over that's worth money. So now you learn to cash flow, you get into something virtual, you learn to get into a virtual business, could be e-commerce, could be virtual sales, it could be a myriad of different things. Learn how to market, learn how to sell. Now you're cash flowing money. Take that money and move it into places where you know people are going to want what you have. Now, here's the thing with the asset game. You got to also think about on a macro level, what's the best place to park your money once you have it? Because it's not as simple as just making money and then you've won the game. You can make a couple $1 million a year and still not win the game. You could still go back to being broke. Because a lot of people who make a ton of money, they'll spend all the money on supercars, homes, whatever it may be, go broke again. So making money is not in and of itself winning the game. So how do you get into the asset space and win in that sense? Well, when you get assets, you need to have something that's liquid enough to be sold when you want to sell it, meaning that there's going to be enough other people with money willing to buy what you have. So traditionally, people think that if you buy a home or you get a mortgage, that's an asset. That's something that's going to build your wealth over time. It's not the case. That's not true. Not anymore. Because who are going to be the people buying up your home? Well, it would have to be other people who want a family home. Well, other middle class, middle America can't afford homes. So you have to hope that either a big business is willing to buy it off of you to then rent it out to other potential homeowners or potential families, or you have to hope that somebody with enough money in the middle class will just come out and buy it from you. It's becoming less and less likely, especially in the Western world, because people aren't moving here, people are leaving here. And then the third worlders who are coming here, you got to hope that they're going to get rich enough to be able to buy that house from you one day. It's not a very liquid, very safe investment. So you're really better off doing real estate in a country or an economy that's growing, like somewhere in the Middle East, somewhere in Dubai, somewhere in a place where you can buy a property where you know people are going to be moving there, not leaving there. People are leaving a lot of these states. People are leaving a lot of these countries, these Western countries, and go into places that are more affordable or have better economies. So you have to move somewhere it's more liquid for you to have that asset. So just buying a home for yourself, a single family home, is not necessarily the right option. You got to think about what's happening on the macro scale. What are people actually going to want to buy down the road? I'll give you another example. A lot of the people getting rich nowadays, they're getting rich from selling to businesses or selling to governments. Okay. If you want to make a lot of money, you either have to take a little bit of money from a ton of different people or take a lot of money from a few. If you can figure out how to take money from less people, but more from each individual person, the better you're off. Okay. Because that money flow is going to be more steady. You're going to make larger sums of money at once. You're going to have less problems to deal with. So if this is how people are getting rich right now, especially in the Western world, they're either robbing their own governments or robbing from the government or selling to these monopolized businesses, right? A big business model right now in the US is everybody gets into a company to be able to sell it to a bigger company. That's what they try to do. They try to build up this small business, get bought out by Coca-Cola, get bought out by Pepsi, get bought out by Amazon, get bought out by big tech companies like Oracle or X or they try to get bought out by these larger companies. That's the whole business model now in the West. The economy has become so monopolized that people, their whole business model is build something up large enough until it's a competitor for one of these larger companies, and then they just buy you out, and you continue to monopolize the economy. So if this is how people are making money, how are you going to position yourself in a way to do that? In the insurance industry, that's exactly what we're doing. Building up an insurance brokerage to the point where we can exit for 9 figures, 10 figures, to a larger private equity company or to a larger brokerage, larger business, exit, take our liquidity, take our money and go elsewhere. That's literally the whole game plan. We're doing the same thing. So you could do it that way. You could try to sell to big businesses or sell a product or service to a big business. Or what's the other way that people are getting rich in the West? Realistically, actually getting rich? Defrauding or selling to the government. So think about Section 8 housing. As opposed to buying a single family home for yourself and hoping that you're going to get rich off these single family homes, or somehow just owning your own house for 30 years. Well, not owning it, paying it back to the bank and trying to own it after 30. Better off buying real estate, and then instead of trying to sell to individual people in the middle class, sell it back to the government or sell that property to the government. That's exactly what Section 8 is. So the people who are making all this money in Section 8 are genius because they understood, instead of making my consumer the average person who in today's America is fucking broke, poor for the most part in comparison to the wealthy, let me sell to the government because the government has the money. They can print it. They can always have the money. That's a fantastic consumer. That's a fantastic client to have is the US government. So you take your money from virtual sales, you get into the insurance industry, you go learn how to make $500,000 a year. Maybe you're a fucking animal. You go make $1 million, $2 million, $3 million a year. You take all that cash flow and you start buying Section 8 real estate. Why Section 8? Because you sell to the government. The government's always going to guarantee you rent. Now, all you got to do is just make sure that your renters, the people that actually are in the Section 8 program that then get into your property, don't absolutely destroy the property. If you can do that, you got a money printer on. Boom, no drama. You always are going to have tenants. You're always going to be guaranteed that rent from the government. As long as you have tenants and you screen for them well, and they don't come in and completely destroy your property, you got a cash cow. So it's genius. So that's the way that I think about it. Where's the money going? It's going online. I need to be virtual. Okay, great. You cash flow. Let's say you're cash flowing through virtual sales. You're making money. Where do you now park that money into assets to continue to make more money? You want to do that by either owning a company and selling it to a larger business or buying up assets like Section 8 properties and then selling to the government. So this is a literal roadmap that you have to be able to get yourself in a position where if your goal is to make 100 million, that's a viable way to actually do that. And we know people who have sold their brokerages for 100 million plus. Most famous example is Patrick Bet-David. So maybe you don't sell your brokerage for 100 million. Maybe you sell it for 50. You take that 50, invest it properly over the next 10 years, you turn it into 250. Right? There's different ways to go about it, but this is an actual roadmap. And the reason you can come up with a roadmap like this is because if you understand what's happening on a macro, now you can go back on a micro level and make the decisions that are going to put you in a position to win at the highest level. You understand what the point I'm trying to make? Is there's got to be some type of game plan. There's got to be some type of, here's the roadmap. 5 years from now, I need to be here. 10 years from now, I need to be here. But not only that, 10 years from now, I need to be in a position where I know the economy is going to be moving towards, so I land on the right mark. You have to account for that, for the moving of the target over time, right? Give you another example of that. When you send a rocket to the moon, you don't just take a direct flight to the moon, because by the time you get to where the moon was at from when you took off, the moon has already moved. It's rotated and moved along its axis of rotation. It's gone. So you have to, on your trajectory, aim. You have to lead it so that by the time the rocket actually approaches where the moon's going to be at, you're catching it at the right time. This is kind of how you have to look at 5-10 years down the road. There's going to be movement of the target over time. You got to make sure you're setting yourself up in a way now where you're actually hitting that moving target when you get there. Okay? Same thing how you lead a passer in football. You don't throw the football to where that receiver is at from the time you let go of the football. No, you got to lead him so he runs into the catch. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to lead yourself. Anyways, so these were some of the things I was thinking on the macro level. So then I go down this deep rabbit hole of, personally, I'm a Christian. So I go down this deep rabbit hole of, okay, well, what are the Abrahamic religions? What came first? What came next? Why did they come in succession? What's the ideology? What's the theology behind each religion? Because these are things you got to think about, because people around the world believe in these religions. Therefore, they use it as a framework for their morality, for their governments, right? The Western world, the governments were created through a lens of Christianity. So that's how you have to look at the world. Okay, in the Western world, if these governments were created under a Christian morality, am I actually playing the game within the same context, the correct context of how this was set up, the system, right? I go down this rabbit hole of, okay, what's the relationship of Abraham between these three religions? Well, Abraham is the theological father for these three religions, right? For the Jewish people, Abraham's the literal descendant or the literal patriarch of the Jewish people, like his DNA, like his bloodline, they come from him. Muslims, Christians, it's more of a theological father, okay? And so from this one individual and his belief in monotheism, his monolithic belief, from him draws these three religions. So what are the stories that come from that? That's the rabbit hole I went down. And so I believe the better that I understand the context in which the game is being played, the better understanding of the rules of the game that's being played, the more successful I'm going to be at the game. Because I'm not losing, I love this saying, I'm not losing the forest for the trees. Posted that on Instagram the other day. I'm not going to lose the forest for the trees because I'm so hyper fixated on the micro, on the individual trees, that I miss them. I miss the forest for the trees. Don't miss the forest, okay? Now, when you're also grounded in your beliefs and your theology and what you believe is moral, it also is going to help you on your day-to-day because you're going to have a better sense of, for lack of a better term, a better sense of purpose in terms of what you're doing. Because if what you're doing daily doesn't align with your true belief system, you're going to feel dirty doing it. You're going to feel, you won't get that sense of peace. You won't get that sense of true conquest, that true progression in your life unless you know you're doing it with the correct moral backing. Making money is fun, but if you feel as if you're truly defrauding people, you're truly hurting people without providing any type of value, you have to be a pretty sick person to do that. And some people do that. But if you do have a conscience, you do believe in a higher power, you do believe in a moral authority, you got to make sure that what you're doing aligns with what your true belief system is. And be critical of your belief system. Do you actually believe those things? Do these things actually feel right to you? That's essentially the macro that I want to start out with, okay? Take a step back, dissect the world for what it is. What's going on? How are people making money? What are their beliefs? What are your beliefs? What are you doing on a micro to be able to help you get there? Now you've dissected on a macro level what it is that's going on in the world. Now you got to make the choice of, am I with the right people to help me get there? These types of conversations are the conversations I'm having with the people I do business with. So the reason we have such a strong connection and a strong brotherhood within our brokerage is because everybody has the same, they have the same North Star. They're pointed in the same direction. So even though we're all selling life insurance, we're building this brokerage, and we're looking to put ourselves in a position to get a multi-$100 million exit, everybody has the same sense of direction that we're trying to get to this end goal. It's not just about life insurance. It's not just about virtual sales. It's not just about making $1 million, $2 million a year, which in reality is nothing, right? I'll make over 2 million next year. It's not a lot of money. I promise you it's not a lot of money, okay? It's not enough to set up your family for generations. So especially if you want to live any kind of exciting lifestyle. I need to have Ferraris, Lamborghinis, McLaren, supercar. I have to have everything. It's not a lot of money. So as we're building up to this income, we're building up to this exit, the reason we have such a strong connection is because we understand what we're trying to do with the money afterwards. There's a clear vision. We want brotherhood. We want family. We want unity. We want to be able to trust each other whenever dark times do come. Because the money in and of itself is not the goal. It allows us to have a tool, power, influence, resource to accomplish what it is that we really want, which is security for our families, security for our wives, our children, our mothers, our fathers. Influence. Influence is important because in the hands of the right people, you make the world a better place. I truly believe that the people I do business with are well-intentioned and want to have money, power, and influence to be able to influence the world in a good way, in a positive manner. In the context of Christ, in the context of morality, people who are broken but want to be saved, people who want to help others be saved. This is why we do business so well together, because we have that same, that general direction we're trying to get into. And the other thing that we're aligned on is we're not looking at life insurance as a mean to an end. It's no, the life insurance itself, this industry is fantastic for putting you into a position where you can become monumentally successful and wealthy. It's the best place for somebody who's young, has time, has energy, lacks power, lacks influence, lacks income, lacks resource, is able to come in and make something of themselves. At the very least, leave with the skill of sales. That even if this is not the industry that they become wealthy in, they take everything that they learned from doing business with myself and those around me, that they can go be successful in a different realm. And so many people I've developed in the past have become successful in other realms, even though it didn't work for them in this industry. But at least they learned the mentality, the mental toughness, the fortitude, the salesmanship that it's required to be successful in a world filled with savages. We understand that this is a vehicle to get us to that next checkpoint, that next destination in terms of now we win the game on an asset basis. Remember that. We do business in a different way. This is a big part of our value proposition in my eyes is we're not here to sell you on the idea that life insurance is the end all be all. No, our goals are much larger than that. This is just simply the best vehicle for somebody to be able to provide for their families based off of their own talent, their own work, to then put them into position, to slingshot them, to catapult them into the next realm of money, power, and influence, which in order to get there, you need to have cash flow. You need to have money, which is what we're doing in this industry. So, and through the life insurance industry, I've been able to do that. The most money I ever made in 1 year was from taking the money I was making from virtual sales, putting into assets, in this case being crypto, and then making more in crypto that year than I ever did in a single year in life insurance. So think about that. The most money I ever made in a year came from an asset class that was funded through the insurance industry. Do you understand? So it's a way to develop the cash flow to then input it into an asset class. And this is how you now win the game. Because once you break through to the asset class, once you break through and you're in a position where you can actually own, accumulate, and maintain and generate revenue off of assets, you've won the game. Now you just preserve, now you just don't fuck it up. This is also why, on a macro sense, it's very important to keep in mind how you're diversifying your assets, because even though you've broken through to the asset class, if you're too concentrated in terms of the plane in which you're playing, you can still, over generations, lose the game. Why? Because if all your assets reside in one jurisdiction, under one rule, so let's say, for example, all of your properties and all of your assets are within the United States of America, if your family, generations from now, or yourself, do something to land yourself in jail, or do something to piss off the government, or do something to indict yourself within that jurisdiction in which all those assets are now located, they can all be seized, they can all be taken, they can all be liquidated. So once again, on a macro sense, you got to also be smart about where you're placing these assets and how you're holding them. Okay. Again, things to think about, because when you're trying to become as successful and you're as ambitious as somebody like myself, these are things you have to think about. Otherwise, you will run into problems that could have been avoided. More money, more problems. If you want to become as big and as successful as somebody like myself, and you truly believe you're going to be a multi-billionaire, you're going to be a billionaire, as I believe for myself, you cannot operate under one jurisdiction, on one plane, on one field. You have to be everywhere. You have to be diversified. Multiple driver's licenses, multiple passports, multiple properties in different countries. You can't leave yourself exposed. Again, macro. The macro is important. Thinking about things on this scale is important. It sounds airy-fairy. It sounds, oh yeah, sure, okay, that sounds good. Well, what if you just don't do anything wrong and it won't matter? That's the problem. You doing nothing wrong right now and it not mattering could be the case under the current legislation, under the current administration. 8 years from now, under a different administration, under a different rule of thumb, those same actions, which were perfectly legal and deemed perfectly okay, could now be seen as worthy of jail time, right? It's all subjective. The law is subjective to the rule of the person that's in rule. So it's the same thing with investing. Any good investor would tell you not to have your entire net worth in one stock. Now, they would tell you to diversify your portfolio so if that one stock goes down, you still have money elsewhere. Your whole portfolio doesn't go to shit. It's the same thing with the way that you manage your assets and your money. It can't all be in one place. It's the same concept. You have to diversify your risk. At the beginning, though, when it comes to income, you do have to be very precise in the way you attack that income, because you can't do many things at the same time and do well at all of them. So I'm talking about on a macro sense. On a micro level, though, yeah, you have to focus your time on one thing. So a big problem I see young men have is I would do, 3, 4, 5 interviews every single day, 6 days a week for years, just interviewing people for our brokerage, my first brokerage. And one of the common themes I saw between all the young men I would interview is almost all of them had the ambition of doing 3 or 4 or 5 different things at the same time. So they would want to come sell life insurance, do virtual sales, but at the same time have an e-com store and sell cars and flip shoes and manage real estate, and before they had any money at all. That is incorrect. You don't diversify your income in that sense until you've actually built them up in a way where they're self-sufficient, they're self-generating, and now you start to diversify how you make money. At the beginning, you don't do that. You have to become specialized in one skill set in order to demand money for it. Why? Because somebody who's good at everything will not ever get paid as well as somebody who's fantastic at one thing. I'll give you an example. Perfect example. Somebody who's great enough to play, let's call it 3 different sports on a collegiate level. So they're pretty elite. They're not number 1, number 10, number 100 in the world, but they're pretty elite at a sport. They can play football at a collegiate level. They can wrestle at a collegiate level, and let's say they can run track at a collegiate level. Let's just say they can diversify their skill set that way. So they're pretty good at all 3 sports. But if they're only good enough to play at a collegiate level in 3 different sports, they'll never make any money, because at the collegiate level, you don't make money. Though, instead of diversifying that skill set over the course of 3 courses or 3 sports, if they dedicate all that time and energy in becoming fantastic at football and making it to the NFL, now they become a multimillionaire. Do you see the comparison I'm drawing here? So at the beginning, you do have to concentrate your time and energy into one skill set. Virtual sales. sales. That is the best way to do it. Objectively, it's the best way to do it. It's the least startup cost, the most potential for income. You learn about money, you work with money. You understand what it's like to sell. Every business is sales, so you might as well learn how to sell because every company starts with a sale. Every business starts when somebody learns how to sell. Until a product is sold, until an income is generated, that business doesn't exist. So you may as well learn sales. You may as well understand how to market. That is the best skill set that you can learn when you're trying to get into an independent industry or become independent in your own business. You have to learn how to sell. Otherwise, you're going to end up paying a shit ton of money or a large commission to somebody who does. But at the end of the day, somebody has to sell. So you may as well get into virtual sales. You may as well try it. Stop thinking so much. You don't have time. You don't have time to waste when it comes to getting into a new industry or learning how to make money. You have a very short period of time in which you're young, hungry, energetic, and malleable enough in your own mind to learn the skills that are required to become free financially in this society. You have a very finite short window of time. And too many of us already waste 4 years of it in a university learning something that's not even going to do anything for us. And actually, in turn, putting yourself in debt and paying a massive opportunity cost for not making money that 4 years. It absolutely annihilates people for 4 years of their lives. So even if you got lucky and you only did 4 years of college and you come out with a huge amount of debt, and that's like typical situation. You have now about 8 years for you to get rich enough to enjoy at least your 30s as a wealthy person. Because by the time you hit 40, if you're not rich already, how much can you really enjoy? Are you really going to enjoy that Ferrari as much at 50 as you would at 28, 29, or 30? Would you really enjoy that super yacht at 65 with a couple of young chicks, 25, 30, hanging around on the boat, 22, looking cute, looking good? Probably at 65, you could be lucky. You'd be lucky if you could still crack them. And if you can, good for you, but it's not going to be as great if you were 28 with that 22-year-old, that 23-year-old. It wouldn't be as good. So you have so little time. You cannot waste that time. You have to move with speed and with urgency. You have to make money now. Quit wasting your time. Because the more leisurely that you move, the more opportunity you miss, the less money that you make, and the less time you can enjoy the eventual fruits of your labor. If you know you need to move, move. Do not be afraid. So many times I speak to young men and young women who tell me, hey, I'm really interested in working with you. I'm really interested in getting into sales. I'm really interested in quitting my job. But here's why I have to wait, and here's how long I need to wait, and here's what I need to happen in order to be in a perfect situation to be able to... Fuck that. You will always lose. You will never jump. If you keep thinking about the perfect time to jump, you're never going to jump. Move. Put yourself in a position where you're forced to succeed, where you're forced to compete. The paradox of it is when your back is up against the wall and you have no other option than to succeed is when you will succeed. Not when you're in the perfect situation and you have a backup plan. You can always have a place to retreat to. As soon as things become difficult and become tough, you're going to retreat to that position. You're going to retreat to that place and you're going to quit. Same thing with marriage. You see what happened with marriage in the Western world. Many things happen with marriage. The exchange is no longer 50-50. Therefore, men aren't going to get married. Women want to get married, but it doesn't make sense for men to get married. Men don't get a virgin. Women want everything paid for, everything taken care of. This man gets a chick that's been ran through. Doesn't make sense anymore. But for the people who do get married, one of the reasons that the divorce rate is so high is because it has now become acceptable for people to get divorced. 100 years ago, it would never happen. If you got divorced, that was shocking. People looked at you weird. People thought something. In religious faiths, divorce doesn't exist. You get married for life. And so when people truly believed there was no way out of this marriage, I had to figure it out, I had to make it work, people would do that because there was no other option. But now that there is the option of divorce and that it is now okay in our society to get divorced, see how quickly people get divorced because there's a way out. So you see, it's the same thing with business. If you have a way out, you're going to take it. If you don't believe there's a way out, or you put yourself in a position where you cannot possibly take the way out, the easy way out, you're going to figure it out because that's the only option. And then another big reason that the marriages don't work anymore is because, unfortunately for women, I feel for them, is they're expected to do everything that they would have done in a traditional marriage, plus do what a man has to do, right? So now you see so many women who they have to go to work, they have to make money, they have to help pay the bills just to be able to afford the house, afford the groceries, do all these things, right? So they're expected to have all the same responsibilities that a man has in the workplace and from an income perspective. But then they come back home and they're still expected to do the rest of the chores that they would typically do, which is like cook, clean, laundry, those sorts of things. So of course they're getting upset because it's no longer a fair exchange of value, right? The man takes care of his duties, the woman takes care of hers. Now they're conflated. Now she's expected to do both. Obviously, they're frustrated. Obviously, the marriages don't work because the traditional gender roles are still there, but not really. So now there's a double expectation. There's a double responsibility, which, of course, I would be upset as well. So I'm expected to do all these things at home on top of being outside of the house for 8 hours a day, making money to help pay for the bills. It doesn't make sense. So that's just one more side note for the young men is make sure you're putting yourself in a position financially where you're not going to have to put the women that you care about in that situation should you choose not to. If they feel that they have to work and have to help pay the bills, it's always going to be an issue. And then if she makes more money than you, don't run away from that. That'll never work out either. Okay? So those are the lessons for today. Keep in mind what the macro is. Keep in mind what it is you're trying to accomplish, bigger picture, so that you're making the right decisions under the correct pretense on a micro level so you can hit the target. And then make sure you're not waiting to jump. You're not hesitating. Make the move. Take the action now. Have some urgency. Don't wait till New Year's or January 2nd or January 3rd before you start to do your resolutions, etc. It's stupid. Do it now. You have all week this week. You have this weekend and all week before the 1st to accomplish goals, set up your tasks, make money, operate when other people are deciding to take off. This is the chance for you to close the gap on those who are more successful than you. People with money right now, people who are successful, they're taking vacation time. They're spending time with the families. They're doing the things that they deserve because they put themselves in a position financially where they can afford to do that, which is the point of making money, is not having to work. But this doesn't mean you get to take off. This means you now close the gap on those who are relaxing. As the world stops to rest, you continue to run. I was calling yesterday on the phones. I wrote $10,000 almost $10,000 in premium, $9,200. I wrote $9,200 yesterday in premium, not even trying. Why? Because I know nobody else is calling their leads right now. Nobody else is telemarketing in different industries. Everybody's relaxing. Everybody's chilling out on the 26th of December. It's a Friday. Take the weekend off. It's a long weekend. Every single person I talk to, they bought. Anybody that's working right now is making double because they're not having to compete with the same pool of people that they would on a normal weekly basis. So you don't understand the value of how much you can gain from working right now. Everything is 2x right now. Your work is worth double on Saturday and during the holiday season when other people are taking off. When other people aren't working, your work is worth double. Okay? And the reason I say that is it's actually something that comes from the Old Testament. There's a story about whenever the Israelites had gone into the desert and they had nothing to eat when they were walking in the desert. And so God, in an effort to be able to give them something to eat, placed forget the name of it, but it was like a dew on the ground that the Israelites could pick up and eat that for the day. It was similar to, it's kind of like a bread. They could eat that for the day and survive. Though, if they ever tried to pick extra and save it overnight so that they didn't have to work the next day, that food will always go bad. They weren't able to keep it overnight. They weren't able to store it overnight. Though the one day of the week where their efforts were worth double was Saturday. It was on Saturday only that they could pick up twice as much food. It would stay overnight and they would have enough to eat on Sunday. Why would he do that? Well, because on Sunday was a Sabbath. He wanted that to be the day of, you worshiping the Lord. You don't work on Sunday. But the lesson I draw from that is, yes, keep sacred the Sabbath. But the lesson is that on Saturday that I drew from this is your work is worth double because other people just aren't out there doing what you're doing. So everything you do on Saturday is going to be worth double because it's going to take care of your Sunday as well. So you may as well work on Saturday. You may as well close the gap on those who aren't working right now. And that's a decision that you have to make. If you think you're in a position where you don't have to do that, God bless you. Though deep down, if you know you're not where you need to be at, Saturday should be a mandatory day for you because everything you do on Saturday is going to be worth double. So why would you work Monday through Friday and take Saturday off? You're better off taking off Monday and working on Saturday. So outside that, ladies and gentlemen, one of these episodes coming up here soon, we're going to have the gentleman from Jersey on here. We're going to have some other guests coming on, some people in the industry that I have close relationships with, have done very well, made millions of dollars. We'll have them on. We'll pick their minds a bit, understand how they look at the world, understand how they made their money, provide a different perspective. Though I assure you, much of the message will remain the same. You're going to have to work hard. You're going to have to be a problem solver. You're going to have to stop looking at the world as a place of negativity and a place of no opportunity. You're going to have to start looking at the world as, where are the problems? How can I solve them for people for a price? And that's how you make money. But outside that, we're good to go.